Hello and welcome to Getting Started with Tsunami Part 2. My name is John Dickinson, and in this tutorial David Vinson will continue his demonstration of Tsunami, this time focusing on underwater techniques.
Red Giant Tsunami is now available as a plugin for Adobe After Effects, Apple Final Cut Pro, and Apple Motion. It contains some wonderful features including true reflection mapping, displacement mapping, atmospheric effects for creating fog, rainbows, and haze, a time-saving grayscale mode, depth of field rendering, which makes it easy to composite additional layers with depth mats, a tiling feature, rendering options which contain a range of choices to suit the time and needs of your next project, as well as water loops to create seamless looping water effects that animate flawlessly. Hello everyone, this is David Vinson for Red Giant Software. Today we've got some exciting things to cover with a favorite plugin of mine, Red Giant Tsunami. Are you looking to create photorealistic water? Red Giant Tsunami has been used in many feature films, television productions, and commercials for exactly this purpose. Tsunami first generates precise 3D geometry of an ocean surface. It then ray traces the result for output that looks like real water. This tutorial will talk about a really fun part of Red Giant Tsunami, which is bringing your scene underwater. To do this, we will take advantage of an underwater preset in Tsunami's extensive preset manager. Then we'll look at the parameters that the preset has adjusted and make some of our own adjustments. As a finale, we'll add the Trapcode Shine Light Filter, a terrific product that's also carried by Red Giant Software. First, let's create a project that's 640 by 480 for purposes of the tutorial, 10 seconds in length, and we'll name this Tsunami Underwater. Click OK. And then you're going to go under Effect. First, make sure you've added a new solid, and we'll call that Tsunami. And then you're going to go under Effect, Red Giant, Tsunami. Okay, awesome. So basically what we've got here is our default scene, and what we're going to do first is we're going to go into our presets here. Got a little graphic GUI here, and under presets I want you to go down and under underwater select Caribbean. And at first nothing happens because you have to click the little go button, so let's click that now. Okay, cool. Not very realistic, but a very good place to start. So one thing you need to make sure of while you're working is we want to work in full resolution. That's so we can see Tsunami's output and make sure the output is fully accurate. So what we're going to do as well as we're working is under render options, under render mode, we're just going to keep it on texture no geometry. Okay, that's just going to speed things up, while we're getting things set up. We'll switch to realistic mode fairly quickly, but basically right now texture no geometry is just the rendered texture that has not been applied to the polygon. So if we go into render mode and take a real quick look at the wireframe, we'll see here's our wireframe view of our ocean, and we can see that we've got a three-dimensional wireframe mesh that's being created, but our texture has not been applied to that yet. So we're in texture no geometry mode for right now, just to keep it fairly speedy. So the underwater preset has changed two parameters from their default settings to bring our Tsunami camera underwater. Let's take a look at those two parameters so we can understand how the parameters work. Twirl down the camera section. We'll notice that the elevation has been set to a negative value, -10. Elevation is the height at which the camera sits above or below the ocean surface. It makes sense that setting elevation to a negative value would push the camera below the surface. If I set the value to 10, you'll notice that we're now above the water. But let's go back to -10. Tilt has also changed. The default value for tilt is usually 100. Okay? However, we want to be back at our value of 70. Okay? So tilt is related to the x-axis rotation of your camera view. Think of it as if your camera was strapped to your forehead and you were nodding up and down. If I set the tilt to 120 degrees, you'll see what looks like a blank image, because this sets the camera view parallel to the ocean surface. Values below this point our camera toward the water, which is why the underwater Caribbean preset shows 70. So let's go back to that value. Since I'm on a Mac Pro here, I'm going to go ahead and change my render options to realistic. It's not going to slow things down too much. So now in realistic mode, just remember what we've got there is our generated texture has been now mapped onto the mesh. So we're getting a true 3D distortion, and also the rendering is much, much better. It's still not looking very realistic, but we're going to get to that in just a moment. The Caribbean preset has also made a number of adjustments for water coloration and light refraction. If we twirl down the light 1 section now, let's take a look at that. The light elevation has been changed from a default of 82. Let's open this up a little bit. Light elevation here has been changed from a default of 82 to 60. This option sets the height that the light source hovers above the horizon. Since we're already below the horizon line, a light elevation of 60 degrees means we are looking at our light source from within the water and seeing the refracted light that seeps downward toward the camera. If we put the elevation value back to 82, you will notice that the scene darkens. You're also going to notice that there's a little bit of an orange tint to it as well, and that's because the sun's actually going down. One thing that Tsunami does very well is it also will shift the coloration of the sky depending on the time of day, which is a pretty cool feature. But for now, let's go ahead and set our light elevation back to 60. Okay, looking good. Let's also look under render options at another value that's been tweaked. If we take a look at the gamma scale, it's currently set to 0.62. The default is 1. I'm going to set that to 1 just so we can see what's happened. Gamma scale lets you adjust the overall brightness and contrast of the colors in your water scene. A lower gamma value like the 0.62 setting here increases the water's brightness and decreases the contrast. So what we'll do, let's go back into gamma scale. And 0.62 from the default, it's a little bit too bright, so I think I'm going to set it to about 0.72. Yeah, that's good. Now we've got a value that's just about in between there. Now let's move over to the ocean optics and take a look at the watercolor and also talk about scale and index of refraction. The index of refraction was changed from a default value of 1.34 to 1.02. Index sets how much light coming from below the water surface will be refracted. A lower value for the index increases the brightness. Also in ocean optics, the watercolor was changed from black to blue. This color swatch sets the color of the light emanating from below the water surface. This color isn't too important when you're above water, hence that's why it defaults to black, but when you're underwater, the color will add brightness and detail. There are a few other minor changes from the Caribbean preset, but we've pretty much covered the important ones. So now that we know what Tsunami has already done for us, let's go ahead and help ourselves to some other changes. I'd like to get a better camera angle for one thing, so let's go into the camera section. All right, and let's change tilt to 88 degrees. All right, 88. All right, that's a little better. And let's also change our pan to 68. That's going to move our light source, the sun, over to the right so it's not such a centered composition. Now let's make the ocean a little bluer, so let's twirl down the ocean optics section. Go under ocean optics. And let's change our watercolor scale from 1 to a 1.5. This parameter affects the intensity of the light refraction. Raising the value causes our watercolor to brighten. We can make the color deeper by moving the light source as well. Let's twirl down light 1. Let's go up there now. Twirl down light 1 and set the light elevation to 69 degrees. All right, much better. This will raise the sun in the sky and increase the water contrast a little. Open the primary wave section now. What we're going to work on now is the detail and sort of the quality of what's going on here with our mesh that's been generated. Let's set our coarse grid size from a default value of 3.8 to 2. And then let's set our fine grid size to 0.2. Much better. Lowering these two values increases the resolution of the 3D mesh that Tsunami uses to create waves. You're making the polygons smaller that make up Tsunami's 3D mesh. More polygons can fit in the scene, thereby increasing the resolution of the mesh. The end result for our water scene is that the light refraction and water texture looks more defined and has more detail. Well, we're pretty much finished now with Tsunami's parameters. As the final part of this tutorial, I'm going to bump up the water's volumetric light and color intensity with After Effects' built-in level filter and a well-known light ray plugin called Trapcode Shine, also carried by Red Giant. If you would like to follow along but don't own Shine, you can download the demo version from www.redgiantsoftware.com. So first what we need to do is apply our levels to Tsunami. But first, before we do that, let's duplicate our layer. Okay. And now we'll go under Effect, Color Correction, Levels. Let's set our input black to 127. This is going to increase the contrast nicely. And next, let's create our light rays by choosing the Shine filter under Effect, Trapcode Shine. And what we want to do is we want to move our light source, but first, before we even do that, let's change the colorize parameter. Let's close this up so we can see it a little better here. Let's go into colorize and turn that off. Set that to none. Okay. And then what we want to do is we want to change our source point. Okay. Let's change our source point from its default of 320 to 40. Let's scoot that to 600 and we'll tab over. And then we'll set the Y to -52. And what that's going to do, that's actually going to move that point up and to the right and off screen, and now we've got the beginning of our light rays, which is looking pretty good there. So this has positioned the virtual light source slightly outside of the comp, above the highlights. What we need to do now is let's set our ray length to a little bit of a higher value. Let's go up to about 6, so our rays cast down a little further into the water. Much better, a little brighter now too. Alright, that's looking good, but we need a little added detail to our light rays. So let's twirl down Shimmer. This is going to add a little bit of variation to our rays. And under Shimmer, we're going to change the amount from 0. Let's bump that up to 40. And then let's change detail to 25. Much better. So it's broken up the light rays a little bit there, giving them a little bit more definition. If the colors in your scene don't look exactly right, you can always add a blue solid and lay it over the scene. So let's go ahead and do that. Things are looking a little bit murky here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new solid, but I'm going to select a blue that I'm liking. So somewhere between is what I'm looking for. So let's click right there. It's looking good. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to my modes, and I'm going to set the mode for that to overlay. Okay, and I want to tweak my opacity a little bit, so let's take that to about 70. And it's looking a little bit dark, so what I'll do is I'll open up my solid settings with Command-Shift-Y, and I'll click on here, and I'm actually just going to raise it up. There we go. Click OK. Now everything's going to be a lot brighter. Yeah, that's looking really good. So what I've done is I've already rendered out an example of how this is going to look. The final rendered Tsunami underwater. Looking really good. We've got our ocean surface undulating by as our sun light rays shine down into the water. And we've got a nice volumetric effect going on there. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. This has been David Vincent for Red Giant Software. For more information, trial versions, and support, visit www.redgiantsoftware.com.